Welcome to the Council of Moms, where we talk about the things that nobody else is talking about or the things that everyone's talking about. Whatever's on your mind, if it's parent-related, the Council of Moms is here to help guide you through all of this kind of, discussions, questions, all of it, right? I'm really excited about today's Council of Moms. I've asked everyone to introduce themselves and as a way to get to know them a little bit better, also mention maybe something that they've said out loud that's really shocked them as a mother. You know, the things that after you say it, you go, yeah, I never thought I would say that out loud. I'll go first. One thing that I never thought that I would say when my kids were little, I remember just saying it like I'd said it a million times. I hadn't, but it was, we don't point guns at each other when we talk to Jesus. I remember I said that and I thought, there's going to be a lot of things that come out of my mouth that surprise me as a mother, and that was one of them.
Yes,
also today with us we have...
I'm Jeanette Bennett. I have 5 kids, 2 young adults, 2 married, and a 6th grader. So, and one thing I never thought I would say is, are you going to graduate? She did, but by the skin of her teeth. So, yeah.
I said that too.
I'm going to say that this year.
Okay, good. Oh, we've all said that.
Hey, yeah.
Never thought we would.
I thought we'd have a 4.0 valedictorians.
Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
Good.
Good to know.
Okay, my name is Brooke Hoopes. We've got 6 children ranging from about 20 to 8. And it's hard to choose of the many things that I did not know I would say. But the first that came to my mind was a night when it was like 9:30. And I said, you have to finish your Lucky Charms before you can have dessert. I was like, what world am I in?
Who are we? That's funny.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm Amy Hackworth. I'm a mom to 3 boys, ages 9 to 19. And mine, one of many, also is you can't pee on the church lawn.
Yeah.
That was it. During church.
Later,
Sunday.
maybe.
Yeah.
Mondays, let's go ahead.
Especially during church. Have some respect. Yeah.
It's just 2 hours. Let's keep it.
I appreciate you all being here to participate in this experiment that we call the Council of Moms. I have learned the most with my conversations with women that I admire and trust who've been through it and who are willing to be vulnerable and honest when talking about the things that we worry about or want to do better or, want some vulnerability and empathy attached with. And that's why I'm really proud of the Council of Moms and what we've been able to do. And having said that, we've been spending a lot of time reaching out to our audience and asking them, you've listened to the Lisa Show and you've heard the Council of Moms. What questions do you have? And I got a lot of questions back, and that was really interesting and eye-opening, the things that people are thinking about and talking about. A couple of them surprised me, right? So we've done a few of these, and there was a question that was kind of itching in the back of my mind that was tripped by a couple of questions, and that is this. And I'm going to give a little background to it. So sorry that I'm being a little long with this, but I think you'll understand it better if I explain it a little bit. I have noticed, especially when talking with women of different generations, that there are certain sort of hot topics to every generation and every stage of parenting, right? Like what you think is so important and the parenting question or judgment of the day changes all of the time, right? So, for instance, our parents weren't talking so much about technology and how it does, and we're obsessed with it, right? Our sort of trends and our focuses as mothers, I think, are so important because it informs how we're raising our children. So my question is this: what are the topics, the things about parenting that we're not talking about that we should be talking about? I want to kind of take that focus back, not just on the whims of society or what's popular and coming, but what do you think? All of us have been parenting for a while. We're all looking at it from different angles. We've got some life experience that has taught us the good, the bad, the ugly. What are we not talking about in our discussions about motherhood that we should be talking about?
The first thing that came to mind for me is like when my kids were little, it was about keeping them clean and those clothes are dirty and this, milestones you should be reading, you should, your ABCs and all that. And now that I'm a little bit past that, I think about, I want my kids to have a lot of empathy and kindness. And I think I didn't focus on that maybe enough. Because when I see them enter, even like the workforce or being a roommate, if they don't have that like empathy and kindness, that matters so much more than what their GPA was or if they can play the piano,
Yeah.
So I wish I would have, and I still can, right? I still got kids. Yeah. I want to focus on that more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of those social emotional skills.
Right.
I think that's something that maybe gets overlooked. It's something that I think is so valuable for kids in the same ways that you're saying. And also in terms of their resilience. I don't know, maybe we talk about resilience a lot, but I feel like that ability to handle a hard situation, to deal with something tough, we have for a long time, I think, been in the mode of solving problems for our kids, jumping in when someone's been mean at school, those kinds of things. And of course, there are times to do that. But I'm right now sort of realizing how much more hands-off I could be as a parent and that it would serve my kids more than I thought it would.
I love both of those thoughts. And I think for me, sometimes it's looking at other generations that helps me center myself within our generation. For example, my grandmother was, I think, 106 when she passed away.
Wow.
Not very long ago. And every time I left her home, her questions were not like, who's on the honor roll? Or what achievements are your kids attaining, right? She just would kind of look at me and look at them individually and say, how are you? How are they? And that emphasis on well-being, on being a good person, I think, again, we talk about it, but for me, it's that prioritization that I think I learn about generationally is none of these things that seem to matter in the long run.
Yeah.
Right. And if you go to a funeral, it resets all that too, right? So it's like nobody's talking about how much the person weighed or like what
Not once.
Not once have they mentioned
once.
it doesn't matter at
you're
that
right.
point. It doesn't matter at all. Or really their achievements. It's more of like who they were, how they made you feel.
I always find it interesting that, we realize this when we look back at different generations, kind of at the totality of life. And I feel like the things that we should talk about are the things that we discover sort of on the way that we didn't know was important. I hesitate to add like one more thing, and that is not what I feel like we're doing here. I have noticed that there is so much like loneliness, isolation, disconnect, and self-judgment on moms, right? Like we feel, and if you look at it and study motherhood and parenting, we are doing more for our kids than ever, yet we feel like we're never doing enough. So it's not working. So you're called to sort of like do less to build that resilience, like they'll be okay.
Yeah.
And not focus so much on the achievements and things like that, I think is totally great. Something that has been really positive in my family that I feel like no one ever really talks about, especially like on a grand, like an international scale about like parenting needs more, or whatever, or is just sort of the joy and laughter in it, like how funny it is. And I know that usually when we're talking about parents, it's like they're the butt of the jokes, like if you look at like sitcoms and stuff, it's like the doofus dad and the controlling mom. And it's just like these tropes. And I just feel like, because I love TV so much, I want it to be more interesting and more realistic.
Yeah.
And I wish that we were talking about like family culture more often. You know what I mean? Because I have a lot of parents who ask me, oh, you guys laugh a lot or whatever. And it's not like we're laughing all the time. But enough so that I'm like, oh, it feels like this is counterintuitive to parenting. It's like you have to be serious and you got to get good grades and you got to get a good meal. And like, like it's, but they don't talk about the culture of it. And how do you foster like, what are the inside jokes in your family? What are the things that just you guys do and nobody else does that creates this sense of connection? That kind of stuff I wish we talked about more about, humor and family culture.
So last year, my third grader had a family culture project, and I
No
love
way.
that the teacher has this. She does this every year, and she sent home a list of questions. And at first, I was like, really, truly drew a blank. I was like, our family culture, I don't know what it is. And then as the weeks went on, I just kept thinking of more and more and more things like that. Like, oh, these are inside jokes. These are the places we love to go together. It was such an enriching project to think about and to spend time with. And it really did take time. It really was weeks of thinking about it that I felt like it came together in all these really great ways where I felt really proud of our family culture. But I think you're right that it had not been on my radar at all before then, except to generally be kind and loving, right?
Yes.
A very broad, vague
Principle-based culture.
This is our family culture. But to then dive into some of the things and to find pictures that represented that or to find products. I thought of fun things. At first I was like, we don't have any traditions that are unique to our family. Christmas and, holidays, of course we do that. Thought, what is unique to our family? And then just thinking about it, that, oh yeah, we do. We have a bunch, but they weren't sort of top of mind.
What's
Anyway,
interesting is we kind of don't know what our family culture is until you marry into another family. And then you're like, but they have a culture,
Such a good point.
that's wrong. Or,
Here they come.
Yes. Oh, really? Okay. They do that. They say that. Okay.
Yeah.
Priorities are there.
And
so there
so
is
jarring.
a family. It can be, right. And I'm part of this. Okay, good. No, it's great. I love my in-laws. But you do all of a sudden see another culture because I think you get used to the air you breathe.
Sure.
And you don't even, I love that you and your son and your family took time to really look at your culture.
It was
That's
so
cool.
much fun. It really was.
I feel like when we go on trips, we're better at this than other times because funny things happen, right? Like the waitress says something funny or, somebody asks to sit at your dinner table and you let them and it's like, what is happening right now? And it's just funny. And so we try, we're not always good at this, but like in notes in the phone, you like to write down the funny phrases or the things. And then like at the end of the vacation or like a week later, as we read through and we laugh all
So
over
great.
again. It's so funny.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And we realize that we do have inside jokes and all of that, but sometimes I think just life starts happening and you don't really realize you're participating in a culture.
But I do wonder if it's the anecdote for us all feeling so much pressure and like outside judgment of like, oh, well, my family, like I feel this. My family doesn't look normal.
Remind me what normal looks like.
Exactly. That's why I'm laughing. I'm like, what do I mean? Typical,
I know.
whatever. And I feel the pressure of it. Sometimes I get some comments, but I think mostly it's in my head, based on expectations or how I was raised or whatever. And one time someone did make a comment recently about my family not being normal, and I was so offended. And but it was true. But I didn't want anyone else to. It's like,
no.
I can beat up my brother, but nobody else better touch him. It's like that whole whatever. But it did make me think about, the comparison. We know that our kids, especially our teenage girls, are depressed in alarming rates. And I think, and I'm glad we're talking about that. But what we're not talking about are real solutions. We're saying, well, they should never be on their phones or we should limit it. Absolutely. Like whatever. Everybody's different. Also, this is how we live in the world now. It's how we do our jobs too. Like a lot of anyway. Not to go off on that. But my point is I wish that we were talking about ways to help them and ourselves feel more connected, feel more a part of something, feel less isolated. And for me, that like a strong family like culture of like, we don't like sports ball. We like, this band. Everybody wants Taylor Swift tickets, but our family wants these tickets. But that kind of like leaning into the differences instead of trying to hide them, which is I think what we do a lot of times on social media. I think is I wish people were talking about that a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think it's an actual paradigm shift. For so long, I feel like I spent time in the space of what we weren't or what I wasn't, kind of that list of this mom does this and that watching and families and children. But growing in that comfortability of this is what we are. We're the family that ... And I think building that within myself even has allowed our family to build that. Like, we are noisy at dinner. We are not a one person, talks at the same time at dinner, which maybe when we have guests, I'm like, okay, everybody listen. Like, let's just take a minute to listen, or, whatever. And then I realize when we have guests, you're going to laugh a lot. Noelle's going to use funny voices and make us all laugh, and we might not listen to, or whatever it is. Yeah. Growing in that comfortability, I think, breeds that sense of identity in a good way.
Yeah, and I also think that when you guys were talking about kindness and looking out, and that, I mean, that's where to do it. That's where we do it, right? In our families.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were talking about, we don't talk about solutions, that's how I feel about all those problems and challenges. And I feel like sometimes the culture of parenting, for me, has such a broad range of things that I do worry about with my kids, right? And I know that these are concerns, things like screen time and social media and loneliness and isolation. And I think the focus on all those problems sometimes takes away my sense of power to do anything about a solution, right? I would be better off choosing one thing that I really consciously focused on, like saying what we are. But I think we get swept away sometimes. So I just, lay awake at night worrying instead of saying, here's one thing I can do. The problem feels so vast that I just feel sort of powerless about it.
I love what you're saying about focusing on what we do, not what we don't do, like playing offense instead of defense, if that's the sports ball reference we
I
can
love
use.
it. I'm here for it.
But because
Stage direction, but whatever, in my mind. That's fine.
Kids are so sick of us talking to them about their phones, right? And what they shouldn't be doing on their phones and how many hours they shouldn't be spending on. But what if we talked about more about what we want our culture to be, and not just even talking about it, but like creating it,
Well, like making notes, like you were saying in your phone of funny things. That's a family bonding thing, but you're also using your phone.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh.
A little quote word. Like that's bonding, to laugh about that.
Totally.
To have a family text thread that has, some funny things, maybe irreverent things, old photos that you pull out that are just
a lot of stuff I don't understand.
Yeah.
Also true. But I like that my kids include me.
And Google it
later.
I go,
oh, that's cool.
Google, what is that?
Right? Oh my gosh.
Was that funny or not? Yeah, but I like that, like focusing on creation instead of just fixing,
Yeah.
And also I think a culture can't just be created by one person.
No.
Wow.
Like my mom is always like wanting us to do these family talent shows, and no one wants to do them.
But I feel attacked.
and the thing is like...
Sorry, go on. I hope this ends well. I am not mom.
And I love a good talent show, especially if it, you can do funny things as part of it, not have serious poetry readings or something. But I think it takes everybody to create a culture so that it's not just we're pulling off mom's idea of what's fun,
That's so great.
And I don't really know how you collectively do that, but I think it's over time, and I think it's involving everyone. Maybe your culture doesn't look exactly like it would if you were completely in control of the culture.
But that's okay, right?
But it's that openness, I think, that willingness to say, oh, you're individuals. You guys, all you kids are individuals. You have your own ideas. You have your things you want to bring to this. I'd love to hear what you want to do, I think
one way you can do that, like when we go on vacation, I always ask the kids, well, what's one thing that you want to do on this vacation that's like fun for you?
Yeah.
And now as I'm talking, I'm thinking about my kids wanted to go on roller coasters, and I was like, no, we're not doing that. But I probably should have said yes. So that's a bad example. But yeah,
it's a
having them
example.
participate.
We had a very similar moment when we had an idea in mind, Rich, my husband and I, of what we wanted to have happen. And then I don't know why we sat everybody down and said, what would you guys? It was a trip, and it was like, what are your ideas? And then as they started spouting ideas that did not match up with what we had kind of fully already planned. And then by the end, one of the kids said, so are we just going to kind of go with your idea? And I was like, okay. And so the next go around, we had kind of a staycation that year, and we let each child pick a treat, an activity, and some of them, there were many that did not want to do that one thing. Yeah. But that built unity in, we are all behind this one child's idea to go on the space simulator, or, whatever those things were. And that, I think, you can't have a hidden agenda when you are seeking that out.
See, but I love talking about like real solutions for that, like you were saying. Like it's one thing to talk about all of the things that we should be stressed about parenting. Like I get it. There's a list in my head, just like you, Amy. but real solutions like, well, what do you guys do? How do you do this?
Yeah,
You know,
what's that going to look
do
like?
this well.
So a tip about that I just learned this week I'm really excited about. It seems so obvious, but it's just so great that when offering kids choice so that we can genuinely offer them a choice, we offer them 2 choices we're okay with. Right? Instead
This
of having,
or that.
Yeah, this or that. I like both options instead of having that, like, wait, what? That's not what you were supposed to choose. How could you?
The $2,000 choice. We're always like, this costs around $50, and our kids are like, let's.
I love it when I ask my kids, what do you want to do? And they're like, we're going to go to the store and buy this. I was like, wait a second. That will last 5 minutes and only cost me. I wonder when you guys like get around like your friends and you really like have like you really need to talk about something that's bugging you about your parenting or something that you just need to unload or process. What kinds of things do you really talk about? Because maybe I'm making some assumptions.
School.
What do you really talk
challenges
about?
with school? It's
Really?
so helpful for me to find a friend whose child is in a similar situation. That's not required, but it's just real helpful to have someone else say, oh, yeah, your kid's barely going to graduate. Oh, okay. What's that? I'm not alone in this. So school is a big one for me, and challenges with school and mental health. Those, again, it doesn't have to be a friend who relates, but boy, that is a comfort when someone can be real and say, yeah, my child's struggling with that too, for sure. But those are the big ones for me. It would be school and mental
Yeah, I
health.
think there was a season where it was like tips and tricks, like where's the best place to buy this, or where do you guys go? But for me now, the true conversations I find myself needing are those long-term issues that don't really have a clear-cut solution. Things like mental health challenges or maybe behavioral or growth challenges that I'm finding within a child that it feels unsolvable. And like I'm picking up the same problem and looking at it, and then I just like put it back on the shelf for a little while. But being vulnerable and coming to friends and saying, have you guys experienced this in your families or with a child? Or, the ups and downs of life, I think those are the meaty conversations that I crave.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I talk with other moms about our kids and their approaches to faith and rules and appearance that are different than maybe what our parents taught us or what we were expecting, and how should we feel about that. And it honestly feels really good to process something that feels super heavy, and you're like, because it's harder sometimes to talk to your kids about your
about a faith
feelings
crisis
about it, or about how the expectations changing a little bit from what you were expecting, and you don't want to say the wrong thing. But to have the Council of Moms or your informal friend conversations, it's so helpful. And usually at the end I'm like, oh cool, this isn't the end of the world, right? Like everything's fine.
Yeah.
I just needed someone to kind of hear me for a second and say, that's hard, but it's okay. You know?
Because you believe them.
Yeah.
Because they're really going to tell you.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
I love that. I feel like for me, I've been surprised because I think anytime you go through a big event and whether it's trauma or a transition, at some level you need to have friends who understand, who've been through it. Not all the time, but at least some of the time, right? And so for me, becoming a widow and becoming a single mom, and becoming single is I didn't really have a lot of widowed friends or single parent. I mean, I did single parent have friends, but for different reasons or whatever. And so seeking out and finding new friends who have experienced that, where I'm like, this is new to me. What do I do? And for them to be like, oh yeah, it's the worst, but you'll be fine. Or they have that confidence, or they're further down the line or something. Giving that perspective to me, those kinds of conversations are ones that I never sought out. I never saw, people talking about, and now I'm just obsessed with.
That's so valuable. And I think we focus on our kids' mental health a lot, and we worry about it and talk about it a lot. But what about our mental health? And I think friendships it's huge. The connection that we have with other women is just a huge component of us being able to do this. And
and don't you think that too, that motherhood is so overwhelming that it's so easy for us to especially in the stages where our kids need us so much physically and emotionally that it's easy to lose those friendships and to miss out on those conversations. Yeah, and I just feel like it's so necessary.
And that somehow it feels like a selfish priority. You know, that it feels like, oh, I probably shouldn't steal time away. But truly, it's mental health for ourselves. And Lisa, as you were talking about, you know, going through this experience and then finding people for you, then you have that opportunity to turn and be that for someone else. And I think those hard-fought experiences, if we hole up with them and aren't willing to, at a lunch, say, actually, I have a child who struggles with that too, or I know what it feels like to, you know, I think those true connections don't come without a little bit of willingness to kind of put ourselves out there and then find those amazing connections.
Yeah, and it does take some vulnerability. I remember when my husband was really sick and he was like, oh, like life was super intense and all this stuff. And he's like, oh, you're going to talk to people about this when it's all done. And I was like, no, I'm not. I mean, I remember how I felt. I felt like why would I ever talk about like the hardest, worst things that have happened? Like, why would I? Why would? And he's like, you will. He was right. But only because other people were willing. You know, when you're desperate.
Yes.
And you'll do anything to help your kids or to help your own mental health. You and somebody like says, okay, let me lay it out for you. Let me tell you what happened. And it's worse than what you went through. And you're like, okay, that sounds awful. And you're okay. You know, there is something really bonding about that. So, you know, talking about these things, talking about things that we're not talking about, which has been the theme of of this Council of Moms, I think is so valuable because we need each other and we have to talk about these things.
Much.
We only have a couple of minutes left before we wrap up. And before we do, I really just wanted to go and ask each one of you, what is something that now you are seeking to talk about that you're going to, and not as like, oh, accountability, you have to talk about this, but what's on your mind as a mom that you're going to have more conversations about because we're not talking about it?
The first thing that comes to mind is I want to talk to my kids proactively more about the pressures they feel.
I love that.
One of my daughters told me years after this was a difficult thing is that she felt so much pressure to be happy because she had friends that were depressed. And so she felt like she was always the one like, I have to be happy in our family and in my friends. And once she kind of started to unravel that, I was like, I didn't even know you felt that pressure. So I want to talk to my kids a little bit more about that.
I love that. The first thought that came to my mind was maybe having a little bit more transparency about what I truly value. And I think keeping myself in check in, you know, if I were to take a percentage of the things I talk to my children about within a day, would that percentage reflect what I truly value or care about? No, clearly not, right? It's logistics, it's timelines, it's expectations, it's corrections. And I think having a little bit more transparency in my conversations of, here is what I really care about. Even with this event, I care that we go to Grandma's house and connect with her because she's important to us rather than like everybody wash your hands and wash your face and get in the car. And I know that sounds idealistic, right? To like ethereal say, this is why we're doing everything we're doing. But just, I love that concept of having my kids see my priorities more clearly in the expectations that I place upon them.
That's really cool. And you're right. I'm sure if we all looked at the percentages, we talk about cleanliness a lot more than we really care about and logistics and grades. But what we really care about is how showing grandma love or whatever. Yeah. That's really cool. Be more transparent.
My kids are like, what is the deal with showering?
Yes.
Like, you care so
you are obsessed. Hashtag obsessed.
I'm like, I know. It's time again.
Can you believe it?
So great. But yeah.
I love it. I recently read something similar to that about kids would be confused about the idea of how much we talk about grades. And that's true for me too. We have huge conversations about school that if kids didn't think, we wouldn't say grades are the most important thing about your life, but kids think that probably because based on the amount of time that we spend. So I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about and think a little bit more about listening to my kids. I've been really working on when they bring a concern, I'm used to, sort of pacifying it really quickly. Oh, I'm really nervous about school starting. Oh, your teacher's so nice. She's going to be great. I think you're going to be just fine, right? Pausing first to say, tell me more about it. What are you nervous about? And giving them that space to be a real person and have their feelings, and then save some of my, shushing and problem solving for just a little bit later.
Oh, that's so great.
I probably still can't help myself. I'll probably still do it, but listening more to learn.
Put that in your notes.
Yeah,
right?
Later on.
Yes. This has been so great. Thank you so much for really, it was a very vulnerable conversation, but I appreciate you being so transparent in expressing the things that you really think. I do feel very passionately about motherhood and moms being able to change the world. If anybody's going to get it done, it's us. And I do think that we can move the needle more by talking about the things that we're not talking about that have the most value. And so thank you for being part of that. I hope everyone listening had a really good experience and will in turn go out and collect your own council of moms and have those conversations that we're not having that we should be to change the narrative. Thank you for listening to the Council of Moms. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Find us on any of the podcast platforms. And if you have a question for the Council of Moms, please leave a comment for us on The Lisa Show on Instagram or Facebook.